This is Anna, and I'm Tak. It's actually the other way around. So we're going to be presenting the brief of Intermediate 2. And the title of our brief is A New Old Town, an exploration of the English townscape based on economical, political, and poetic precepts towards the formulation of a new, exciting, eccentric, elegant, extravagant, enlightened lifestyle for those who are over 50 years of age, who are willing to break free from urban addictions, and who dare to live out of the glass box. So what we're looking for is for people who have a vision. We are living a very interesting moment when we are lucky enough not to afford ourselves the luxury to be driven only by capital or only by values related to money. We have an obligation now to respond to a very serious environmental crisis. And we also have an obligation to resolve very critical conflicts of a cultural nature or religious or social. So luckily, we are at the breaking point where we'll overcome those last decades, which have been quite dark for architecture, that architects have become, a lot of them, puppets, just promoting the values of the capital or these economical values. And so architects have been having quite a passive participation in society. And now, in this moment of shift, we have a great opportunity to change this and to actually become agents in this construction of this new world, of this new lifestyle. So we are actually needed. But we are only able to do this if we have a vision. And what is a vision? A vision is an intuitive response to the situation. You know, it's not something that we achieve through an overtly analytical thinking, but it's something that we achieve if we engage what we call in the unit an organic way of thinking, which is a complex way of thinking that usually actually generates simple responses to problems. So those of you who are interested in working with us, what we ask from you is for you to have a vision or for you to have a strong intention to build one.
So, with this vision, we want to design a new town. Or in fact, it's an existing town that we want to convert into a new town. We're going to work in Aldermaston, which is just near Reading, just outside London, which is a town in crisis. It has been for many, many years. It's a site where there's a nuclear weapon agency right next to this town. And although it's an absolutely beautiful town with a gorgeous landscape park, the town is now virtually empty with, people who've lived there for many, many years, and all the young people obviously have moved into London. So we would like to see what we can do in this town, which is not that far from, London. It's half an hour on a train. Not because it's Aldermaston, but because this is a common theme across the UK. I mean, you can see in the Scottish independent debate recently, more and more local areas are looking for leadership and direction and support. And this town, I think, typifies what's happening in a lot of outskirt towns in England. Not just England, I presume in a lot of places in the world, but we always like to work in the UK. But I think this town really signifies what's happening. And as for your generation, I believe that there'll be more and more opportunities where you're asked to work not in major cities only, but to rejuvenate other places outside of these cities. And I think this whole Scotland issue is really highlighted for us this urgency for people needing something done. So Aldermaston as a town existed as early as 1690 BC, but I think it's more to do with the fact that this kind of quite complex issues to do with this town. So it's quite a typical English town with this vast area of what used to be called a Aldermaston Manor House. Now it's called Aldermaston Park, and it has a series of quite charming, incredible cottages and walls and. But I think, and then in the 80s or the 70s, they tried to build this commercial center in the middle of next to that manor house. And then what you see over there in the corner is the nuclear weapon, the agency site. So the town is sort of historical, but it's getting more and more empty. It needs some injection of your energy, your vision. So so we would use this as an example to enforce your vision. I think the vision could be something that you superimpose or something that you work with existing, which we'll talk more later. But it's something that you work with the context. We're very much interested in the context, socially, architecturally, politically, and most importantly for us, materially. Okay, so we'll show you some archives of our unit.
Yeah, so this was the plasticasting workshop we did last year. We taught our students how to cast using the kind of original old-fashioned method. For us, it's very important that students are willing to work with their hands, making models and making drawings. And the reason for this is that the hands are the best tool we have to convey our intuition. Unfortunately, the computer doesn't deliver doesn't deliver as much as the hands. So this is a requirement that you would be willing to work with your hands and that you would be letting your hands and letting what you do inform what your project is. Not all of it is analyzed, not all of it has a logic in the kind of rational sense. So you have to kind of have this predisposition to set yourself free from this digital devices that become uncannily more and more present in our lives. So this is a crucial thing in our unit. So hand drawings as well. We always mix different techniques. Sometimes digital techniques come to play as well. But it's really mostly this kind of material engagement, the working with the hands, and we also use quite a lot of narrative, some of it fictional, but we're going to talk about that in a minute. So some drawings and models. The other thing about the unit is that we like to work very slowly. And that means spending a lot of time on each fragment, each part of the project. We believe this is needed today. The world is going faster and faster, and we wonder how helpful this is for humanity. So we actually want to slow down, and this is a very important aspect, and working with the hands is part of this agenda. So these are some details of work from last year. Do you want to say anything about this? No. More details. This is our exhibition space.
I think as you can see here, every jury, every presentation, we're we mix drawings, obviously, with lots and lots of things that's built and made. This is the exhibition space last year.
Yes, I think it's also important that we pay a lot of attention to context. So we don't adopt, as it were, a tabula rasa approach. We work with what is there, but kind of trying to extract the potential of what is there and improve it. And we treat, part of the agenda of working slowly is that each thing that you produce is precious. And we have a rule that we've been setting the previous years, but this year I want to have it even more, to be even more rigorous with that, is that when you start a drawing or when you start a model, you finish it until it has the level of what we call an artifact, that is a drawing or an object that you could find in a gallery. So we don't like unfinished objects. We believe that if you start something, it's because you have an intuition about that something that needs to be valued. So we're not interested in producing portfolios that are this thick. We're interested in producing not a lot, but quite precious work. So this is work from a few years ago, from a student that is now in diploma, and it was work that was based on a fictional narrative. Lots of really quirky objects in a house in Soho. This is work from our first year at the AA, which was 5 years ago.
Yeah. This is Summer Islam, who's showing her work upstairs, I believe, in the honors. On the left, she's converted the Alison and Peter Smithson's house completely for a boy who lived between the walls.
And that the other work on your left is Patricia, and again it was work that was based on a narrative and a house that was converted into a theater. This work from 2 years ago, a park in the one you see on the right, a park in King's Cross at the Calthorpe site. And the other one was again work from our first year. And I put this image because I think it interestingly relates to our theme of this year, which is this idea of working with the older part of the population. So our clients will be elderly.
Okay. So when we did our short brief, I had emails from tutors here saying, I'm 50, I'm not old. And I think 50 is the new 30, 20?
You hope.
We hope. But anyway, I think that population is growing in numbers. And part of the challenge for us and the vision is to try and work with that older generation that are getting younger every year. But the main vision, I think, is that we've been working with this very tactile, sensual, small-scale projects for 4 or 5 years with models, meticulous drawings. What we would like to do this year to try to zoom it up a bit. So does this tactile, crafted architecture vision work at a slightly larger scale where we're not just designing a single beautiful space or a room, but could we actually resolve a series of spaces or a series of activities that these elderly generation can enjoy as a part of a connected space? It's also quite important, I think, that as part of the learning, that we very much focus a little bit more on trying to resolve more complex architectural resolution at this stage of the degree.
But this idea is also a provocation, and part part of what I was saying about architecture having followed perhaps without questioning this logic of economy is this idea of the celebration of youth, and this idea of celebration of youth in people, but also in buildings. Like we build more and more buildings that don't age well, and people also, when they are too obsessed with youth, they tend not to age so well. So we like to bring this idea of age back into architecture, really as a provocation to an age that has been too obsessed with the youth and with this idea of what is modern. And this is a balance that needs to be addressed. Obviously, it's a pressing issue in the UK because of the population that's growing old. Statistically, it's a pressing issue in all developed countries, basically, but also in developing countries. But it's also a provocation in an architectural sense. Could we change our paradigm? Or what I would actually suggest is that this paradigm needs to be changed. And architects are the ones who need to lead that change. So we need to step out of this position of being fashion victims and following the trends, to start setting the trends. So if living in London became too expensive, let's just get out and let's just make this a trend. Rather than architects feeling that they need to do what other people define as cool, I think we should be defining what the new paradigms for living are. And this will be an exercise on that way of thinking, on that stream.
Just on the same theme, from an economical point of view as well. I mean, as a practice, we deal with lots of developers, but more and more developers are seeking for opportunities out of London or out of main cities. So this is really quite a practical issue too, where there is an economical shift, because London is just saturated. It's overdeveloped. There's just so much built now. So there is this question of, where do we go from here?
And we're going to get to that later. But what I define as our client is not necessarily defined by age, but I define something that we're going to discuss when we get more into the unit. I have this definition for people who are living part 2 of their lives rather than part 1. And there are people who live part 1 of their lives for their whole life. But part 2 of your life is actually when you sort something out in your mind about things you've lived and who you want to be and how you want to live your life. So you can be 12 and you can already be in part 2 of your life, and in this case you would be our client. But we're quite keen to think about this and to kind of awaken this more kind of active attitude in people, which we don't find so often, not only in architecture, but in society as in general.
You could be 60 and be in part 1. This was our main inspiration last year, Villa Palagonia. It's this vision of the introvert, but we won't go into that. But it's this absolutely amazing villa in Sicily.
And it's something that grew more beautiful with age.
Exactly.
So it's an inspiration. So this is just a quick kind of image of what London is and the property prices, and it's really becoming a city for those who are rich, who have money, and who are usually not terribly imaginative. So how can we counter that? What can we do? And there are many things you can do, but what we're proposing is definitely a response to this scenario. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about our client. We're going to be working with the RIBA, the Royal Institute of British Architects. They are conducting some research on the elderly. So they're going to come here and talk to us. They're going to organize a symposium in November in which we're going to participate. So part of it is really this kind of institutional pairing and dealing with the situation quite seriously, and really trying to come up with solutions that are feasible. But, next slide. part of it is also thinking of it speculatively and using fiction to inform our vision, because the reason why we need to pair up with kind of both the reality and the fictional aspect of things is that sometimes reality, especially when dealing with these critical problems, these marginal problems of society, sometimes the more realistic vision can be a little bit patronizing, can be a little bit narrow-minded. And our job is to expand it. And it's very exciting that we're going to be in conversation with them. So some of our ideas, they can absorb quite quickly because this is on their agenda at the moment. So it's an interesting timing. So our idea is both to engage with what the Royal Institute of British Architects are doing in terms of resolving this situation about the elderly. And another one is to steer up what they're doing, to inject new ideas to this process, to this agenda. And we're going to use fiction to help us with that. So this is a scene from great film, The Great Budapest Hotel, which we're going to watch together and discuss. But we're also going to have a look at literature. So we're going to get to our reading list in a minute. But this is Thomas Mann, The Magic Mountain, which doesn't deal necessarily with the elderly, but it's definitely a vision of an alternative society, of an alternative way of living. So we're going to draw on these inspirations as well.
Okay, I'll speed up a bit, but we're, as we said already, we're interested in the context and what the context offers us in terms of its past, and also in terms of not just the architecture or the building's context, but and the past and memory, but we're also interested in the inhabitants' memory and the visitor's memory and our own memory. How do we erase this? How do we add to this? You know, we can't just keep adding and adding memory, so we have to let go as well. So this would be there'll be a lot of debate about that. And we would use forms of printing techniques to work through these layers of architectural memory as one of the craft, which we've just finished doing in the visiting school this summer. Walls and enclosures. So to begin the designing of the town, we would go straight into surveying the existing context and treat it almost, quite directly architectural. And we would start looking at existing walls and enclosures, and then we would start designing our own walls and enclosures. So that would be straight into term one's work, where we would really kind of start looking at this idea of enclosed space and formation of that boundary. Will be our first term's work.
Yeah, relating to that, we are also interested in this idea of opacity as opposed to an idea of transparency, which has been widely, to which architecture has been perhaps overexposed. So we are interested in this idea of opacity, we're interested in this idea of privacy, we are interested in the contrasts, but we're quite interested really in bringing back architectural values that seem to have been perhaps a bit forgotten in the last decade. So it's not by chance that we're using references there that come from the Middle Ages. Yes, we are interested in this model. We're going to be visiting castles, and we're going to be studying this architecture, not only from a historical perspective, but from the perspective of the present. What role do these castles play in our lives today if you live close to them? What is their image? What narrative is associated to this image? And how does this shape our culture? So yes, in that sense, we are looking to the future, but through an agenda that challenges the idea of the modern.
I think we're a bit sick of the obsession with the transparency.
So this will be an important reference in the year. We already worked with this architect before. His name is Andrea Palladio. Some of you may have heard of him. And this is a page of his treatise, which is called The 4 Books of Architecture, where he teaches architects to build walls. So these are some of the walls that, that one can build, according to Palladio. Now, what is interesting about this is, of course, from a technical point of view, we're interested in this. We're interested in how, how they used to build walls. We're interested in going to a castle and understanding how it's built, really, very literally from a technical perspective. But we're also interested in the philosophical implications of what reading this treatise means today. Now, for instance, it's very interesting to see how Palladio describes material, because the first part of his book is all about teaching architects how to choose materials and how to prepare materials. Now, when he does this, because they're working with natural materials, stone, timber, sand, mud, etc., he is very aware of nature. And he's very aware of this balance between architecture and nature. And I like to say that Palladio's vision of architecture is that architecture equals half-dead nature. So it's a nature that it's almost dead, but not quite. And this is quite interesting, because in this vision, nature and architecture are part of the same spectrum rather than opposite values. And that's very important. And if we are concerned with the environment, and we really should be, it's important to revisit these ideas. And it's important perhaps to look at architecture afresh as a part of nature, as nature that is like on the process of dying. If you like, architecture could be defined as nature that is old, that has gotten too old, and that is about to die. So these are very interesting kind of philosophical concepts that we will engage with, and that we have to engage with, really, as architects, to contribute to our culture, to contribute to our tradition. No, we're doing something new, but we're also continuing a tradition that Palladio started some centuries ago. So just going back to the profile, we are looking for, so we are looking for people who are as determined as Palladio. We are looking for people who are as visionary as Ledoux, who is another of our references. I'm going to be speaking a little bit about him. We are looking for people who are as daring as Lina Bobardi, another important reference. And we are looking for people who are as intuitive as this local inhabitant of Aldermaston. Yeah, I can. As I said, we privilege handcrafted work. We're going to take inspiration from, we like architectural drawings very much. We mean plans, sections, elevations. We think it's very important. They're very important to kind of convey our ideas. So we're going to be looking at this, like just kind of very old-fashioned ways of drawing. We're going to be looking at more modern media as well. We will have seminars each month where we will discuss themes that are important to us. So the seminars will be internal, but we're also going to invite people from the public to engage with us. We're going to invite developers. We're going to have, as I said, the IBA. We're going to have artists, and it always like to kind of to inspire us and to kind of agitate, to provoke some conversation, to provoke some polemics. For technical studies, we're going to focus on materials, and we name some materials there. So, it could be stones, bricks, concrete, wood, hair, fur, mud, junk, whatever that is material that is around us. This is what we're going to study. We're going to learn how to source them, how to prepare them, how to draw them, how to build with them, how to maintain them. What is their economical, political, environmental, and poetic footprint, and what history is embedded in them. So this is very much in line with this previous slide and the way this old architect Palladio treats materials and understands where they come from and how you prepare them and how do you use them and how do you maintain them. We're going to be taking the same approach. And we're going to travel to France for a field trip in February. And we're going to visit some buildings, but I'm going to show them later. Do you want to add anything to this? No. So this is a drawing by Ledoux. Ledoux is this guy. And he was an architect that worked in the 18th century, mostly towards the end of the 18th century. And what is also interesting about these architects that we are taking as a reference is that, like us, they were experiencing periods of transition. Periods where the society was changing, the demands were changing, and they had to respond to these demands. So in the case of Ledoux, he was envisioning what would be the industrial city, would be the industrial society. So he's drawing this, and he's trying to organize the means of production. We're not going to only look at this as these architects with admiration. We're also going to criticize their work. But it's very interesting to see how they could see forward and how they actually created a niche for themselves by having this vision. So this is a drawing, a set of drawings by Ledoux. And this one as well. Perhaps one aspect that is important to highlight is that the drawing that you see in the left, there is, in Ledoux's work, in a lot of the drawings, there is a dimension, an atmospheric dimension to the work. So this is a factory for producing salt, and you see this smoke inside the building. And we are very interested in that. We are very interested in how architecture and nature, they kind of interact in an organic way and not in an analytical way, and how atmosphere can be brought inside the building, and how a building can be brought into a park, and how when nature grows, what becomes of this architecture. So it's really about this organic vision, and we're going to study some of this with Ledoux's work. This is another drawing by him. Another element that is very interesting in these references that we are looking is light. The presence of light to make an atmosphere. A lot of these drawings are black and white, so by neutralizing color, you kind of get this understanding of how light works.
So we would also look at other cultural references, Chinese garden walls, traditional English garden walls, Japanese walls, where the creation of a certain boundary distinguishes from what happens in the context. We would go to some castles. We would look at some, not just to see, not because we want to design castles, but to see how the treatment of the walls, and spaces inside that.
So this is one of the buildings that we're going to visit in our field trip. It's the Royal Salt Works by Ledoux. So this is a pre-industrial city that he designed, and it was partially built. Stone masonry, very beautiful ornamental details. What was also interesting about Ledoux is that he, like most architects from the 18th century, he drew from tradition. So he was working with a classical vocabulary, but he had a lot of freedom with working with this tradition. So he reinvented this idea of the classical ornaments, of the classical orders, with a pinch of humor, with a lot of, he had great drawing skills and a lot of social commentary. But this idea of drawing on traditional, on existing, and reinventing it is something that we're interested. And this is another building that we're going to visit in our field trip, the Ronchin by Le Corbusier. And in this building, we are interested as well in the kind of organic aspect of it, the roughness. And in particular, we're interested in the chambers of light and how Le Corbusier manipulates light inside the chapel.
And then we'll look at some contemporary examples as well in this country. Astley Castle.
So we have a very concise bibliography. And the reason for this is that we like to look at things slowly, to spend time on things, and to study them carefully. So, the books that you see there, some of them are literature, and some of them are architectural theory. And we're going to study each of these books in quite a bit of detail. And these are some inspirations.
That's it.